One of the most dangerous women in the universe stood before him, her glowing blue skin and long, sharp ears catching every light. She whispered, "If you've captured me, end it." But the human's only answer was a smile. In that moment, an interstellar game began, and neither of them realized who would truly win. The Asterisk Odyssey cut through the black velvet of space like a knife through nebula mist, its hull humming with energy as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Commander Elias Kael leaned against the railing of the observation deck, the faint glow of distant stars reflecting off his face, and watched the captured Arvani cruiser drift in the distance. He'd never been one for theatrics, but the sight of a royal vessel, elegant, angular, and impossibly alien, being escorted by a human warship always gave him a sense of small, ironic satisfaction. Not because he hated aliens, exactly. He respected most of them enough to fear them, but because, in this instance, the universe had handed him a singularly audacious prize. Inside the brig, the Arvani princess sat with a posture that could have toppled empires. Her skin shimmered blue under the artificial lights, catching every edge of the metal cage with a subtle iridescence, as if the stars themselves had been painted onto her. Her long blonde hair fell like a comet's tail over her shoulders, and her ears, elongated and delicate, twitched slightly at every metallic groan of the ship. She did not fidget, did not plead, did not even glare. She simply waited, and that waiting was more infuriating than any scream or defiance. Elias entered, casual as a man walking into a bar, and found her calmly observing him. Those striking blue eyes narrowed just enough to suggest she had already decided his weaknesses. "So," he said, leaning on the edge of her containment pod, "you're the famous Arvani princess." He smiled, and she tilted her head, eyebrow arching in silent assessment. "And I suppose you've captured me?" she asked, voice soft, carrying a melody that could charm a warship's AI. "Yes," Elias replied, voice steady but threaded with amusement. "And apparently I'm supposed to kill you, or so I hear whispered in the corridors of history." He gestured vaguely to the metal walls, and she gave a tiny smirk. That smirk, so small and elegant, reminded him why history sometimes got distracted by the wrong details. "I suggest you do it quickly," she said, almost conversational, "or I will make it difficult for you." The faint humor in her tone was like a knife wrapped in silk. Elias chuckled. "Difficult how?" "By stealing my ship and leaving me floating in a starfield. Trust me, I've been there. Not fun." She raised a single hand, delicate fingers, tipped with translucent nails that caught the light. "I am more dangerous than you imagine. One misstep and this ship, or you will pay." Her voice had that rare quality of absolute certainty. Elias leaned closer, resting an elbow on the cold metal rail. "I think that's what makes this interesting," he said. "Everyone says you Arvani are scary, but you might be scared of a good cup of bad human coffee first." She frowned. "Coffee?" she asked, clearly not understanding the concept. Elias grinned. "Yes, it's a liquid that tastes terrible and makes you jittery, but you drink it anyway because humans are ridiculous. I'll make you try it sometime." She rolled her eyes in a manner that suggested both intrigue and disbelief, a combination Elias found utterly charming. For hours, the conversation meandered. They sparred verbally, teasing each other over their respective species' absurdities. She mocked his insistence on keeping the ship tidy, pointing out that in her galaxy, a battle-scarred corridor was a sign of experience and not negligence. He countered by pointing out that in his galaxy, organized chaos saved lives, and perhaps one day she'd understand that. She laughed once, a soft sound that was startling against the metallic hum of the brig, and he made a mental note. Dangerous people could be utterly disarming when they laughed. Outside, the stars continued their silent vigil, billions of light years away yet close enough to make both of them feel absurdly small. Despite the tension of captivity, there were moments of ridiculous levity. At one point, she tried to reach a control panel beyond the bars and accidentally triggered the emergency lighting, bathing the entire brig in red. Elias quipped, "Congratulations, princess. You've officially turned the ship into a nightclub." She glared, but the corner of her mouth twitched, betraying amusement. It was during one of these quieter moments that the princess leaned back and observed him more closely. "Why do you refuse to kill me?" she asked, her voice softer now, tinged with curiosity rather than command. Elias shrugged, leaning back against the wall with a grin that somehow suggested he knew secrets even he hadn't fully grasped. "Because," he said slowly, "I think you'd be more interesting alive than dead. And honestly, I like seeing how much you hate me without using weapons." She paused, eyes narrowing, and then almost imperceptibly a smile curved her lips. "You are irritating," she admitted. "And yet I find myself curious, a dangerous combination." Elias laughed. "That's the idea. It's like space poker. You never know if you've won or if you're about to be eaten by an alien princess with excellent aim." Days pass like this. He allowed her limited access to the ship's library, where she impressed him with a mastery of star charts and alien diplomacy that could shame entire fleets. She, in turn, mocked the human attempts at ship cuisine, calling rehydrated protein packets sad lumps of gray despair, while secretly tasting a few out of curiosity. Their interactions became a dance. Her elegance, intelligence, and alien grace against his sardonic humor, cunning, and stubborn sense of self. Each challenge, whether tactical or conversational, forged a subtle connection, an unspoken acknowledgement that the universe had delivered them together for reasons neither fully understood. When a minor sabotage attempt left the Odyssey briefly drifting near a pulsar's magnetic field, it was the princess's quick thinking that recalibrated the engines, while Elias' quick hands and reckless charm stabilized the ship. Afterward, they found themselves sitting in the dim glow of the observation deck, silent except for the hum of the engines. She reached out tentatively, brushing a fingertip along the console where his hand had been, and Elias quipped, "You know, humans call that flirting. Or machinery abuse, depends on who's looking." She tilted her head, ear flicking, and replied dryly, "I find your species amusing, and fragile, very fragile." But for all the humor, for all the teasing and minor jabs, the tension never fully dissipated. There was an awareness that every interaction carried stakes far higher than either wanted to admit. And yet, as the stars wheeled past in their silent, eternal patterns, neither of them could deny the thrill of the game. The princess with her blue skin and comet-like hair, the human with his irreverent smirk and chaotic charm, both trapped in a ship hurtling through space, both finding that perhaps the most dangerous thing in the universe was the bond forming between them. Even when night fell, or whatever passed for night in the artificial lighting of a human warship, the ship was alive with small laughter, quiet teasing, and shared glances that lingered just a moment too long. And Elias, staring at the reflected starlight on her skin, thought perhaps that some captives were worth more than freedom or conquest. They were worth curiosity, amusement, and maybe even something resembling care. She, for her part, found his stubbornness infuriating and endearing in equal measure, a combination that made her very much alive in ways the cold corridors of her royal vessel had never allowed. When the alarms rang in the middle of the night, just a test, fortunately, Elias groaned and muttered, "Couldn't even have a normal night without you trying to reorganize the ship, could you?" The princess smirked, eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Organization is subjective," she said, long ears twitching, "and I am always correct." Elias shook his head and laughed. "You know, if this whole galactic princess thing fails, you'd make a great comedian." She tilted her head, lips twitching. "And you would be a dreadful audience, Commander, but I will tolerate your laughter for now." The night stretched on, stars turning slowly outside the observation deck. And inside the ship, amidst tension and humor, jokes and jabs, a fragile, improbable connection began to grow. Between human and alien, captor and captive, humor and gravity, laughter and danger, all spinning together in the vast, infinite dark. The Odyssey drifted through the velvety black of interstellar space, and for the first time since the princess had been brought aboard, the ship's corridors were not filled with tension so thick it could be sliced with a plasma knife. Instead, there was a strange rhythm, a subtle harmony between the human crew and their most unusual passenger. The princess, whose blue skin seemed to glow faintly in the hum of artificial light, had taken to exploring the ship as if it were her own palace, though she did so with the careful curiosity of someone testing a trapdoor. Her long blonde hair swayed behind her in waves, catching the sterile glow of overhead lights, and her pointed ears twitched constantly, detecting the smallest vibrations of machinery or the muffled snorts of human technicians. Elias, leaning lazily against the bulkhead outside the command deck, watched her with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. She had just informed him, in the most imperious tone imaginable, that his ship's dining hall was an insult to any sense of galactic hygiene, prompting the human cook to defend the rehydrated protein packs as the finest approximation of edible sustenance available in Sector 12. Elias chuckled and muttered, "And I thought intergalactic diplomacy was tricky." The princess glanced over her shoulder, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "Diplomacy is trivial. Taste is where true power lies." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Then by your logic, you're a tyrant among gourmets." She shot him a look, sharp and amused all at once, and Elias thought, not for the first time, that this woman could topple empires with nothing more than a raised eyebrow. Days passed, and the ship hummed with its quiet life. The princess had taken to learning the ship's alien interface, manipulating holographic panels with delicate fingers tipped in translucent nails that glimmered like starlight. She worked in silence at first, and Elias, ever the provocateur, could not resist. "Careful," he said one afternoon, leaning over her shoulder. "Don't want to accidentally launch us into a star cluster while recalibrating the oxygen scrubbers." She arched an eyebrow, her ears flicking. "If you fear death by mishandled technology, I am happy to demonstrate proper precaution." Elias grinned. "Or we could gamble. I like gambling. It's more fun than boring safety." She rolled her eyes, yet the faintest hint of amusement tugged at her lips. Humor had become a bridge between them, a way to navigate the absurdity of their situation. She would mock his insistence on tidying every loose cable, while he teased her about how the glowing patterns on her skin were probably an impractical form of camouflage. "You're lucky," he said one evening, leaning against the railing in the observation deck, "that I find it distracting enough to keep you alive." She raised a hand, flicking at him lightly. "Distracting. My existence is far more than a distraction, human, but I accept your mortality as a compliment." Elias laughed, a sound that bounced off the steel walls and made her ears twitch in disbelief. "Compliment received. I'll add it to my list of things humans shouldn't take literally." It was during one of the longer stretches of quiet that the sabotage first occurred. The alarms were sudden, sharp, and merciless, slicing through the ship like a plasma blade. Elias reacted instantly, moving with practiced speed to the bridge, but the princess, far from being merely a prisoner, was already manipulating the alien interface to isolate the damaged sections. "Impressive," Elias muttered, almost under his breath as he activated the emergency override. Most captives would be screaming. She cast him a sidelong glance, her blue eyes narrowing, sharp and calculating. "Screaming is inefficacious. Besides, I prefer actions to theatrics." Elias smiled faintly. Efficient and terrifying, got it. Through the chaos of malfunctioning gravlifts and flickering lights, they worked side by side. At one point, the princess jabbed at a holographic display, muttering under her breath in Arvani, and Elias, trying to mimic her tone, said, "I think you just cursed my ancestry." She gave a faint snort, clearly amused at his attempt. "You will live," she said in a tone that could have been either judgmental or complimentary, "because your audacity amuses me." Elias leaned closer, smirking. "Then I'll take my chances, princess." The subtle camaraderie was startling. In the middle of danger, humor had become their shield, cutting tension with laughter sharp enough to pierce the gravity of near disaster. Once the ship stabilized, Elias guided the princess to the observation deck, where the stars spilled across the black expanse like spilled ink flecked with diamonds. He offered her a seat beside the window, and for a long time, they simply watched. She tilted her head, her long ears catching the hum of distant engines, and mused aloud about the constellations and the planets visible in the distance. "Your species seems to enjoy staring at these points of light," she observed. Elias shrugged. "We're obsessed with shiny things. Some of us even get sentimental about them." She laughed softly, a rare, delicate sound that made his chest tighten in unexpected ways. Sentimentality is illogical, she said. Yet I find it agreeable when applied to certain humans. Elias smiled, glad to hear I qualify. Their days settled into a pattern of subtle rituals and shared absurdities. The princess would critique the navigation algorithms with ruthless honesty. Elias would respond with half-serious quips about the improbability of her rules in human logic. And yet beneath the teasing lay a current of trust that neither could entirely name. When the occasional crew member wandered too close to the brig with unwelcome curiosity, she would flash a glare that sent the most seasoned soldiers skittering away, while Elias muttered, "She's better at intimidation than half my fleet. And prettier, too." She heard him and rolled her eyes, long ears flicking in annoyance. "Flattery is unnecessary and obvious," she said. "Yet continue, it amuses me." The subtle games continued. Elias would purposefully mislabel her data files with absurd titles like Asterisk Princess Secrets or Alien Blueprints, and she would retaliate by secretly rerouting power to minor systems to confuse him. One evening, as he struggled to restore artificial gravity after she had mischievously redirected it, he threw up his hands and muttered, "You're a nightmare in a lab coat." She tilted her head, ears flicking, and replied, "I prefer the term creative problem solver." They laughed, and for a fleeting moment the weight of the universe, the wars, the politics, the threat of her execution, dropped away entirely. Yet danger never truly vanished. Sensor readings occasionally flickered with distant warships, hostile signals pinging the hull, and both of them knew that any mistake could be fatal. Even in humor, there was a current of seriousness. The princess, despite her teasing and occasional mockery, offered insight that saved lives more than once, redirecting crew efforts, stabilizing shields, or recalibrating weapon arrays with a precision that Elias could only admire, and admittedly envy. "I may have underestimated you," he admitted one quiet night, leaning beside her as they monitored the sensor arrays. She looked at him, expression unreadable, long ears angled forward. "Underestimation is the error of humans. It is why you survive for now." Elias laughed softly, "And for now I'll keep pushing my luck." By the time the rogue faction's distress signals faded, replaced by the hum of normal operations, a new rhythm had emerged. The princess and the human no longer existed in simple roles of captor and captive. They were partners of a sort, bonded through laughter, danger, and the strange exhilaration of navigating an unpredictable universe together. At night, in the dim glow of the observation deck, she would hum Arvani melodies while he tinkered with human devices, both absorbed in their work yet sharing an unspoken connection. Humor became their constant shield, a thread weaving through tension and danger. She would mimic human gestures, exaggerate her long ears, and complain about the absurdity of human customs, while he would continue to tease her about her glowing skin and impeccable posture in zero gravity. Every joke, every sly glance, every sarcastic remark deepened a connection neither of them had anticipated. And in the quiet moments, when the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, they realized something extraordinary. Trust had begun to blossom, a fragile and impossible thing between two beings from entirely different worlds. The universe remained vast and indifferent, but aboard the Odyssey, laughter and subtle rebellion, shared skill and mutual amusement became their compass. The princess, who had once whispered for death, now found herself observing the human with curiosity that went beyond mere survival. And Elias, who had once expected to simply capture and contain, discovered that amusement, intellect, and courage could weave bonds stronger than chains. Their journey through the stars continued, and though threats loomed on the horizon, they were no longer alone in facing them. The Asterisk Odyssey approached the neutral station orbiting Helix 9 with a sense of quiet inevitability, the massive structure gleaming like a jewel against the dying sun. Commander Elias Kael watched the station grow larger in the viewport, the light reflecting off his face, sharp shadows cast by the ship's interior consoles. The princess stood beside him, long ears flicking as she observed the docking procedures with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled impatience. Her blue skin caught the glow of the docking lights. shimmering like water rippling under alien suns, and her long blonde hair swung slightly with each subtle movement of the zero-gravity currents. She did not speak, but Elias could feel the tension coiling within her, the same tension he had once hoped to dull with humor and distraction. "Well," he said, voice low, leaning casually against the railing, "this is it, the grand handover. The moment where interstellar politics either smiles at us or decides we're excellent candidates for vaporization." She arched a brow, lips twitching with the faintest smirk. "I presume the vaporization scenario is entirely in your imagination?" she asked, voice smooth and measured, yet carrying that familiar hint of amused sarcasm that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. "Mostly," he replied, "but you've got a habit of making improbable events more interesting." She glanced at him, eyes glinting, and he could swear her smirk had deepened, though she would never admit to amusement in front of a human. As they entered the docking bay, the station's inhabitants turned toward the arrival of the Odyssey. Aliens and humans alike observed, whispering among themselves, some fascinated, some skeptical, and a few outright incredulous that Elias Kael had managed to capture an Arvani princess without immediate disaster. The princess remained composed, though the faint hum of suppressed energy around her suggested she was prepared for nearly any outcome. Elias, sensing the delicate balance of spectacle and danger, leaned toward her. "Remember, if anyone gets huffy, just glare at them. Works wonders." She allowed herself the barest twitch of a smile. "I am more subtle than a human," she replied dryly, "yet your advice is tolerable." The handover was scheduled to be formal, with representatives of her people and neutral mediators present. As the chamber doors opened, Elias noticed the tension in the crowd, stiff uniforms, polished armor, and the inevitable pomp of interstellar bureaucracy. The princess stepped forward, serene and radiant, her blue skin and comet-like hair drawing attention even among the exotic array of species assembled. Elias, for his part, made sure to walk beside her rather than behind, deliberately signaling that the choice of who controlled the narrative was shifting in ways few expected. "Commander Kael," the lead mediator called, voice amplified across the chamber, "the princess is to be returned according to interstellar protocol." Elias smiled faintly and raised a hand. "Ah, but here's the twist. I am entirely responsible for her, and any attempt to move her without my express consent will result in consequences." The room froze. Aliens blinked, humans coughed, and a murmur ran through the crowd like static. The princess, cool and calculating, raised a hand, long ears twitching slightly, and regarded him. "You are reckless," she said, but the faint curve of her lips betrayed her intrigue. "Perhaps," he replied smoothly, "but it's a risk worth taking. Besides, I like to see reactions." There was laughter from a few scattered observers, tension melting slightly, and the ice of ceremony cracked in a way that only audacity could achieve. The princess glanced at him, almost imperceptibly, and then nodded, as if signaling some unspoken alliance. Elias' grin widened. "See, partnership makes life interesting." The mediators, after an awkward pause and a few whispered consultations, reluctantly acquiesced, allowing the princess to remain under Elias' nominal custody while negotiations continued. She leaned toward him as they moved through the chamber, whispering, "You are infuriating, and yet I find this tolerable." Elias chuckled, replying, "Tolerable is the first step toward admiration, or death. Usually one of the two." She rolled her eyes, but the corners of her mouth twitched again. In the days that followed, the princess explored the station under his guidance. Humor continued to weave between them, a lifeline against the tediousness of diplomacy. She critiqued the alien architecture with sharp wit, joking about the entirely unnecessary number of gravity stabilizers, while he pointed out that some inefficiency had saved lives in past conflicts. On one occasion, they accidentally triggered a maintenance drone, sending it careening down a corridor with comic velocity, prompting the princess to laugh. An unguarded, clear sound that startled everyone nearby, including Elias. "I never thought I'd hear an Arvani princess laugh like that," he said. "It's alarming," she admitted, "but oddly satisfying." As their time together continued, the princess began to show unexpected facets of herself. She shared stories of her people, tales of star-forged empires and long-lost customs, revealing humor and vulnerability alongside the unyielding poise she had displayed during capture. Elias, in turn, opened up about human absurdities, mistakes, and small victories, using humor to diffuse what would otherwise be awkward cultural exchanges. They discovered mutual respect that had grown beyond mere survival. It had evolved into camaraderie, curiosity, and perhaps the faintest hint of something more. Negotiations with her people reached a climax when emissaries demanded her immediate return. The chamber was tense, but Elias, with a mischievous grin, stepped forward. "I appreciate your concern," he said, "but I'm entirely responsible for her, and she appears to enjoy my company more than anticipated." The princess, standing beside him with serene authority, whispered, "Do not exaggerate my amusement." Yet she made no move to contradict him publicly. The room stilled. Even the most stubborn diplomats realized that this dynamic, human and alien, humor and courage, was not something easily overturned. In a quiet moment afterward, the princess and Elias watched the dying sun through the station's observation deck. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I did not expect this, that I would feel ease, trust, or amusement." Elias, leaning against the railing, smiled faintly. "Life's full of surprises. Sometimes they're dangerous, sometimes they're good." She tilted her head, ears flicking at the hum of the station. "You are irritating yet indispensable," she admitted, "and I find this agreeable." Elias chuckled. "I'll take agreeable, better than dangerous and less paperwork." The bond forged through tension, laughter, and danger had changed them both. The princess, once rigid and resolute in her solitary command, had learned that even a sovereign could find joy and trust outside the boundaries of protocol. Elias, once a human defined by duty and sardonic wit, had discovered a universe of unexpected alliances where courage, humor, and curiosity could forge connections stronger than fear. When the time came to depart, the princess chose to remain at the station for further diplomatic proceedings, yet she stayed close to Elias, accompanying him on final inspections of the Odyssey. Their humor persisted, teasing remarks about gravity simulators, zero-point engines, and the impracticality of her glowing skin in confined corridors. But now there was an underlying warmth, a recognition of shared experience. They were no longer simply captor and captive. They were partners in navigating a galaxy that was vast, unpredictable, and full of absurdities worthy of laughter. As the station receded behind them, the princess finally allowed a small smile, faint but genuine, her blue skin shimmering in the reflection of the starfield. "Perhaps humans are not entirely insufferable," she said. Elias laughed, clapping her lightly on the shoulder. "See, that's progress, and you're still terrifying, don't forget that part." She inclined her head, long ears flicking, her lips curving into a mischievous smirk. "I shall not forget," she promised. The Asterisk Odyssey sailed onward into the endless darkness, carrying with it two beings from vastly different worlds, forever changed by humor, danger, and the improbable connection that had blossomed between them. And for the first time, both understood that survival, trust, and laughter could coexist, that even across stars and species, bonds could form that defied expectation, endured peril, and left a lasting mark upon hearts and minds alike. The galaxy stretched endlessly ahead, but aboard that human warship, the universe felt just a little more manageable.